Welcome to AK Anime Explainer. Today is explanation of Soul Land 3, Legend of the Dragon King Part 143. Without any delay, start explanation. The staff sword pierced forward with dazzling starlight, but it failed to trip Xie in time as a purple radiance shimmered in his eyes. He was utilizing purple demon eyes to make the best judgment to prevent his opponents from attacking him. He raised the light dragon dagger he had in his hands as he stood unmoved, poising himself in a manner that seemed like he was about to lunge forward. Only, the force in his body seemed to be increasing by several folds as the light dragon dagger in his right hand gave off a brilliant glow like the morning sun. The aura he gave off seemed to envelop the entire stage. What's this? Is this momentum storage? Momentum storage was not a soul skill. Instead, it was an ability he discovered for himself that defied the laws of nature. Wasn't momentum storage already a lost art? How could it appear on him? Standing behind Yixingmo, Duan Hunxiao did not even dare to slow down. As a master control soul master, he was undoubtedly the most suitable person to disrupt Xie's momentum storage. Then, he conjured his flute and was about to blow into it, but a ring of dazzling starlight rose from beneath his feet. Duan Hunxiao's body froze, forcibly disrupting the soul skill he was about to release. Yixingmo missed his stab as well. However, he would never allow Xie to complete his momentum storage since it could possibly knock him out. The tip of his toes touched the ground as his body and sword fused as one. The fusion only stalled him slightly before he pierced towards Xie. However, it was also at this moment when something unusual was seen. Xie's body suddenly became illusory. Yixingmo's forward stab surprisingly penetrated right through his body. His momentum storage had undoubtedly been completed. It still remained inactivated, but the light dragon dagger still maintained a dazzling brilliance beyond what it was on regular days. Then, Xie's eyes shone brightly and his entire being transformed into a golden thread as he swept across Duan Hunxiao's side with a melodious dragon's roar. Duan Hunxiao had only just struggled himself to freedom from the star wheel shackles, and before he had time to react, the golden light before him spread through his entire field of vision. Who would have guessed that Xie's target was not Yixingmo? Instead, it had been Duan Hunxiao since the very beginning. Ding! The flute in Duan Hunxiao's hand snapped in two with a crisp sound, and a sliver of warmth slipped past his throat. How is this even possible? Xie's vanished in a split second after he flashed past Duan Hunxiao, and the golden light he left behind gradually dissipated before it soundlessly vanished. The entire battle happened at an incomparable speed. Before it all ended, a silver light flashed in Elder Cai's hand and was reflected onto Duan Hunxiao's body. Before he knew it, he had already been sent out from the competition stage. No words were necessary. Despite being the strongest Master Control Soul Master in 2nd grade Class 1, Duan Hunxiao had been eliminated. Xie was the best example of how the agility system was capable of restricting the control system with that one critical strike he made earlier. Yuanen Yehue's gaze was a little stunned because she understood Duan Hunxiao's power more than anybody else. Even with Yixingmo present in the battle, Duan Hunxiao was still eliminated just like that. Xie's wore a completely different expression compared to the one he had in his previous battles. The expression he had on his face in his previous battles was far less determined than the one he had on now. When he looked at Yixingmo earlier, it looked like he was burning with the wild flame of a person that knew no morals. However, his target was not Yixingmo. One critical strike, the ability to drift from one place to another while being completely unpredictable, he was the perfect example, a quintessence of agility system soul masters. Even the hypercritical Elder Cai could not help nodding as she witnessed Xie's critical blow. Yixingmo had already turned around to helplessly watch Duan Hunxiao get eliminated. As Xie went into stealth mode, the Star Saint sword in his hand abruptly exploded. For soul rings. He has the same for soul rings too? The entire stage immediately seemed like it was currently surrounded by a galaxy as endless starlight enshrouded and covered their surroundings. Every speck of starlight that fell from above carried an incomparably sharp, domitable force. Before long, the starlight had simultaneously surrounded Xie along with Xu Xiaoyan who stood at the far end. It was a full-scale offensive soul skill and was also an opportunity to turn the tide of this match. As long as the opponent's control system Soul Master was defeated, then both sides would be evenly matched. Moreover, agility system Soul Masters were the most afraid of multi-target attacks from assault system Soul Masters. Yi Xingmo's use of his fourth soul skill, Sword Meteor Shower, was just timely. However, he still had no vision of Xie Xie and was unable to pinpoint his position. If only he could see Xie Xie, he would discover that Xie Xie was shuttling back and forth in his meteor shower like a phantom, passing through 1,000 specks of starlight without even one being able to touch his body. As for Xu Xiaoyan, a second soul ring merely glowed on her body. A dazzling golden ring of radiance enshrouded her, and it was similar to the dazzling starlight. Currently, she was like a mirror that could simply reflect the starlight descending from the heavens in just a split second when they were illuminated against this mirror. A large amount of starlight was reflected, causing Yi Xingmo to be the one confused instead. Starlight Chaos. It was Xu Xiaoyan's second soul skill. Xie Xie emerged at this moment. He appeared amongst the vast starlight and radiance from the sword. Xie Xie drifted so swiftly he seemed like a puff of clouds while his aura was completely concealed. Then, he emerged behind Yi Xingmo's upper torso and his light dragon dagger vanished. Even for the audience below the stage, they were unable to even see a shadow. Instead, they were only able to see a fleeting silhouette. Xie Xie floated and touched down soundlessly. When he was utilizing his momentum storage earlier, there was no excessive force. Instead, he was just like the wind and mist. He was so light there were neither ash nor smoke present. Yi Xingmo suddenly felt the back of his neck tightening as he reacted impulsively. His body reacted by abruptly scurrying forward while the Star Saint sword in his hand scattered thousands of specks of starlight to protect himself. However, the only thing he was in the coming few moments was a fleeting silhouette that came streaking out of the layers of starlight. It twisted and shimmered as it danced through the starlight. Although the starlight was quite dense, it was still incapable of shielding him from this shadow. It was then that Yi Xingmo shut his eyes. He knew that his opponent was too swift for him and that he had already lost the ability to estimate his opponent's exact position from relying on vision alone. He decided to now depend on his other senses. Thousands of specks of starlight fused into one in the blink of an eye as they created a shield before his body at the most crucial moment. Ding! Xie Xie's attack was blocked, the crisp sound revealing his figure. The students from second grade class 1 simultaneously heaved a sigh of relief. The strongest point of an agility system Soul Master was their speed. Once this was taken away from them, they could only watch as assault system Soul Masters rained attacks down on them. Unlike the control system, assault system Soul Masters were incapable of restricting agility system Soul Masters. However, their relaxed vigilance only lasted a split second. Although his attack was blocked, Yi Xingmo, who should have had the upper hand in soul power, was pushed back as if he was electrocuted. As an assault system Soul Master, it was to everyone's surprise that he was shaken by Xie Xie, an agility system Soul Master. Xie Xie's figure emerged, and his shadow dragon dagger switched back into the light dragon dagger. A dazzling golden light brightened once again as a powerful force was unleashed in an instant. It was just like it was in the beginning. He was no longer the assassin who hid in the darkness. Right this moment, he was the bright illuminating son of the sun. It was momentum storage again. His momentum storage is as close as a hair's breadth. Yi Xingmo had only just regained control of his body when Xie Xie had already begun using his momentum storage. As fear spontaneously arose in his heart, Yi Xingmo was feeling a little hesitant to attack after his failed experiment earlier. He wanted to immediately fall back and put some distance between himself and Xie Xie. Not only was his opponent capable of momentum storage, he could also ensure that he was not attacked while he was doing so. This ability alone was already too terrifying. However, it would seem that Xie Xie had stressed Yi Xingmo out so much that he forgot one important fact: Xie Xie was not fighting alone. Suddenly, a star wheel appeared beneath Yi Xingmo's feet with unparalleled accuracy. Streaks upon streaks of golden chains climbed up his body, freezing it in place. The light dragon swept across as the golden light shone. The competition ended. Xie Xie did not even turn his back to look at Yi Xingmo. His light dragon dagger had only brushed past Yi Xingmo's neck. Of course, it would be impossible for him to really take a hit. He walked toward Xu Xiaoyan and she shot him a glance with a smile plastered on her face. Both of them raised their hands at the same time. Clap! Their right palms clapped to celebrate their victory. The entire atmosphere turned silent. Everyone's breath seemed to stop at this moment. If the second grade Class 1 students acted like they had just seen a ghost, how could the first grade Class 1 students not do the same? Since when did Xie Xie become so powerful? Xu Xiaoyan's controlling abilities as well. She was the one that prevented Duan Hunxiao from being able to resist. She was the one who lost Yi Xingmo his chance to launch a counterattack in the final moment. They seemed to be unable to cooperate very well, and yet, they still won the competition so easily. They won. First grade Class 1 has won the match. Roar! A roaring sound of clapping abruptly erupted when Xie Xie and Xu Xiaoyan descended the stage. The students in Class 1's corner were all cheering and clapping. Only 5 people remained slightly quieter. 1 against 1, can you beat him? Luo Guixing asked Xu Yuqing, who sat nearby him. Xu Yuqing's gaze seemed slightly dull. I don't know. His 3 words were a testament to many things stemming from his arrogance. Yuanen Yehui was in a similarly stagnant state. She could clearly see Xie Xie's gaze being directed at her when he defeated Duan Hunxiao earlier. Similarly, his gaze was also on her when he utterly destroyed Yi Xingmo. There was no need for words. He was obviously questioning her with his actions. How am I no good? He had truly grown stronger, his focus in battle, his mastery of the battle situation, his mastery of his martial soul. He was completely different from he was in the past, and it seemed like previous and current him were 2 completely different people. Perhaps it was because of Tang Wulin's exceptional performance that he overpowered everybody else. In reality, every single one of his companions performed admirably well. Did Xu Xiaoyan grow stronger as well? This was the first time Yuanen Yehui witnessed the soul skill, Starlight Chaos. No wonder Tang Wulin could be so confident. First grade Class 1 was even more powerful than anyone could have ever imagined. The second grade Class 1 students had very unpleasant expressions on their faces, Duan Hunxiao and Yi Xingmo included. The competition ended too soon. The entire battle only lasted less than a minute and it was already over. Duan Hunxiao did not even manage to release any of his soul skills. This defeat was both depressing and a shame. They were rendered utterly helpless by their opponents due to the lack of understanding of their opponent's strength. The second match. Tang Wulin, Ji Yu, Yuanen Yehui, Yu Jingyu simultaneously ascended the stage. The restless audience in the sparring arena became quiet once again. If the previous match was to determine the overall performance of both classes, this match would be a confrontation between the strongest students from both classes. Yu Jingyu looked at Tang Wulin with a smile on his face. Wulin, I've something to discuss with you. I think you shouldn't use the martial soul fusion skill. If the both of you are so weak, why bother participating in the duel with the third grade next week? Alright, we won't use it. Tang Wulin answered immediately. Yu Jingyu was momentarily stunned, for this was not the Tang Wulin he once knew. There was no need for him to say it out loud even if did not intend to use the skill. He should be keeping it as a deterrent just in case. Promise? Yu Jingyu inquired closely once again. Tang Wulin laughed. Now, are you afraid? You should probably surrender now if you're afraid. Yu Jingyu raised his eyebrows. Both of you are still 3-ringed soul masters while we're both 4-ringed soul masters. Us, afraid of you. Use any ability you like then. Why is there so much nonsense being spouted? Begin. Elder Cai reprimanded them and declared the start of the ultimate duel between the first and second grade that would determine who was superior. Both parties immediately released their martial souls. 4 purple soul rings rose around Yuanen Yehui's body. On the other side, another 4 purple soul rings similarly appeared around Yu Jingyu's body. They obviously had the upper hand just by looking at the shimmering radiance from their soul rings. On Tang Wulin and Ji Yu's corner, soul rings appeared one after the other around Ji Yu's body. She had 4 purple soul rings while Tang Wulin had 3. Surely enough, Ji Yu had 4 soul rings. Yuanen Yehue let out a battle cry as her body rapidly expanded. This was Diamond Titan, the 3rd soul skill of her martial soul, Titan Giant Ape. Xie could not help covering his face with his palms after finding a seat below the stage. She's always been so aggressive. As Tang Wulin's left leg touched the ground, he took a step forward and dashed outward. He did not use his blue-silver grass martial soul either, as he released both his blood essence soul rings instead. Golden light flashed across the stage and his golden dragon body was unleashed. Similar to her, his body expanded a little as well. With golden scales protecting his body, his golden dragon claw appeared out of nowhere. This was not the first time these two people fought, and they were quite familiar with their opponent's abilities. Soon, Yuanen Yehue shot an air cannon toward Tang Wulin. On the other side, Yu Jingyu's angel wings spread out behind his back as a beam of holy light shot toward Tang Wulin. Yu Jingyu and Yuanen Yehue seemed to always hold the upper hand in terms of overall performance. Their martial souls along with their abilities were much stronger. After an entire academic year, their teamwork had definitely improved by leaps and bounds. Ji Yu was in charge of long-range attacks, so they would have to observe how helpful her abilities were toward Tang Wulin. If there was anyone within Tang Wulin's group that was overshadowed the most, Ji Yu was probably that person. A silver light flashed as Tang Wulin vanished from the spot he was standing in, causing Yuanen Yehue and Yu Jingyu's attacks to miss. Then, the 4 soul rings around Ji Yu's body brightened abruptly. Is this her 4th soul skill? Is she going to use her 4th soul skill as soon as she ascended the stage? To everyone's surprise, a colorful radiance extended from her hand before it transformed into a long, thin staff. There was a long silver handle below the staff and a multicolored ball of light at the tip. Brilliant rays enshrouded the ball of light, and it seemed as if the elements on the stage turned violent the moment the staff was conjured. This was the 4th soul skill, Elemental Staff. Ji Yu held up the elemental staff and the ball of light on its tip suddenly morphed into a pure green. Then, almost immediately, it formed a tornado that blocked Yuanen Yehue and Yu Jingyu's path. Yuanen Yehue's punch missed, but she sent another punch flying shortly after. She had used air cannon again. However, Ji Yu merely responded by raising her elemental staff toward the sky, and almost immediately, the air cannon disappeared. Yuanen Yehue could sense that her air cannon seemed to disintegrate at the exact moment Ji Yu's staff touched it. The composition of air within it seemed to have been dismantled. This is. Shortly after, the tip of Ji Yu's elemental staff turned into a golden color. Then, she pointed the staff toward Yu Jingyu from afar, and he could feel the light element leaving his body to gather toward Ji Yu. Oh dear. What kind of trick is this? Instead of dashing out again, Tang Wulin stood as a shield in front of Ji Yu. He was similarly shaken in his heart when he saw her using this soul skill. This was his first time seeing Ji Yu using her 4th soul skill. Her elemental staff seemed to lord over all the elements to the point that it was even capable of gradually stripping the light element from the holy angel martial soul. Such was its power. With the elemental staff in hand, Tang Wulin could obviously sense Ji Yu's power growing exponentially. Yuanen Yehue growled softly as her 5-meter-tall body clashed into the tornado, outrageously destroying it as she dashed toward their cornd. Yu Jingyu followed closely behind and shielded himself behind the enormous body of Yuanen Yehue's Diamond Titan. The golden shimmer enveloping his body continuously shrank as he forcefully used his martial soul to prevent the light element in his martial soul from being drawn out too quickly. Then, a dragon's roar was heard echoing from within Tang Wulin's body while his eyes shimmered as he turned his palms skyward. Then, the silhouette of a giant golden dragon appeared before his body. It was Golden Dragon shocks the heavens. Shortly after, the 4th soul ring on Yuanen Yehue's body brightened, causing her body to shrink while brutally increasing her power. This was her martial soul, the Titan Giant Ape's 4th soul skill, Devil Titan. She outrageously charged forward in her Devil Titan form, and these two people collided once more after their previous encounter. Boom! The violent boom echoed as Golden Dragon shocks the heavens forcibly resisted the Devil Titan. In the past, Tang Wulin was absolutely and utterly defeated. Although he still staggered backward this time, he was not thrown away. Yuanen Yehui was also beaten until she came to a stop from mid-air. A condensed blue fireball then carved out an arc, circling around Yuanen Yehui and headed toward Yu Jingyu. Presently, Yu Jingyu had resumed full control over the Saint's Word in his hand. He lunged forward with the sword in hand to dodge the blue fireball. However, the blue fireball was circling all over, giving him no choice but to stop. There was no way he would be able to work with Yuanen Yehui. This battle of the Titans between the first and second grade to determine who would represent them had already climaxed from the very beginning. However, Yuanen Yehui's body suddenly shrank as she was leaping into the air. She had spontaneously recalled her Devil Titan. Soon, everything around them turned pitch black. This was the first soul skill of the fallen angel martial soul, Curtain of Darkness. The golden light on Yu Jingyu's body completely vanished at the same time, and he disappeared soundlessly into the dark surroundings. This is. Their dark and light attribute mutually restricted one another. Was Yuanen Yehui not afraid of affecting Yu Jingyu when she used the fallen angel martial soul? Could it be that they were about to use some form of collaborative technique? Tang Wulin grew more and more vigilant in his heart as the situation progressed. Everyone had plenty of combat experience, so it was impossible for Yuanen Yehui to fight aimlessly. Tang Wulin's golden soul rings turned purple, and his third soul ring began glowing. A golden soul ring then expanded outward with Tang Wulin as its center. This was his third soul skill, Blue-Silver Golden Array. Aside from Gu and himself who stood in the middle of the circle, darkness vanished from everywhere the Blue-Silver Golden Array came into contact with like snow melting. It was elemental stripping. Be it darkness or light, they would still be affected by elemental stripping. However, there was a limit to the Blue-Silver Golden Array. It could not possibly encompass the entire stage, and could only disperse the thickness of the Curtain of Darkness. The orb on the top of the elemental staff in Gu's grasp turned golden, and a beam of golden light shot toward the sky. It spread outward in coordination with the Blue-Silver Golden Array. Only then were Yuanen Yehui and Yu Jingyu exposed. At this moment, the two of them made very peculiar moves. The golden light of the Saint Sword flickered within Yu Jingyu's grasp while a pitch-black demon sword exuded a purplish glow in Yuanen Yehui's grasp. The duo raised their swords above their heads and pointed them toward the heavens. A melodious, pleasing voice and a deep, hoarse scream resounded on the stage at the same time, and giant, 5-meter-high shadows appeared behind Yuanen Yehui and Yu Jingyu. A dark shadow filled with a dark aura stood behind Yuanen Yehui and spread its wings. Similarly, a golden shadow stood behind Yu Jingyu with its wings spread out as well. Both the shadows were like oil and water, they did not mix and naturally repel one another. This was the third soul skill of Yuanen Yehui's Fallen Angel, Fallen Angel's Descent, and Yu Jingyu's fourth soul skill, Angel's Descent. They took advantage of the time the Curtain of Darkness brought them and used the full potential of their martial souls. It was then that both the demon and saint sword began to glow and grew to a length of 3 meters. Then, they suddenly slashed toward Tang Wulin and Gu's direction. Golden and purple, 2 huge beams of light magnificently shot out from the swords. The 2 beams of light maintained a certain distance between them, but that distance slowly diminished as they extended further. The moment they were about to approach Tang Wulin, the beams of light merged into one. Suddenly, darkness and light, a terrifying explosion was heard at the exact moment the energy within the 2 beams of light collided. Ever since she lost to Tang Wulin's and Gu's martial soul fusion skill, Divine Dragon Transformation, Yuanen Yehui had drawn a lesson from that painful experience. She seriously considered about the kind of abilities she would need to fight against them. Eventually, she and Yu Jingyu developed this technique, Luster Gloom Saint Sword. Under normal circumstances, light and darkness repelled each other. However, their saint and demon swords were formed by extremely compressed forms of light and dark energy. Before they collided and merged into one, the influence of their own energy towards the other was minimal. However, with the amplification of Angel's Descent and Fallen Angel's Descent, the full offensive potential of the Saint and Demon Sword was brought out. Then, through a collision between extremely compressed light and dark energy, along with the strength of elemental energy, they detonated. This resulted in the explosion, a powerful attack that far exceeds their own individual powers. This was the first time that the Lustergloom Saint Sword was displayed in front of others. In that instant, even the blue-silver-golden light array could only strip a small portion of the elemental energy but could not stop the force of the slash. Yuanen Yehue's eyes shone brightly as she thought. Come on. Use your martial soul fusion skill. There is no other ability you have that can stand against the Lustergloom Saint Sword aside from that martial soul fusion skill. She had researched the divine dragon transformation unleashed by Tang Wulin and Gu in the past. That terrifyingly powerful offense meant that they could not keep it going for too long. The sooner she forced their hands to use that martial soul fusion skill, the greater her advantage would be in this battle. She would only have to wait until they unleashed divine dragon transformation. Then, she would take them on with the Lustergloom Saint Sword. If she could drag out the battle, she could definitely defeat them. However, it was also at this moment that Yuanen Yehue saw Tang Wulin's shining scales. The scales looked like mirrors. Amidst that violent explosion, Tang Wulin spread his arms out and shielded Gu behind him, bearing the full brunt of the Lustergloom Saint Sword's attack. The dragon scales on his body flickered rapidly, and Tang Wulin felt as if he was being dragged into an elemental storm. The feeling of being torn apart that resulted from the light and dark energy repelling one another seemed like it was destroying him. His supreme golden dragon armor could only withstand attacks that were 3 times beyond his defensive capabilities. However, when he witnessed the explosion of the Lustergloom Saint Sword, he felt like he would not be able to withstand this attack. It was clear how strong this attack was. The blood essence within Tang Wulin was being spent at an alarming speed, but he gritted his teeth and endured it. His opponent had picked the perfect time to attack. The Lustergloom Saint Sword seemed to have erupted in front of Tang Wulin the instant the curtain of darkness was dispersed. The entire space undulated fiercely to the point where Gu could not even use spatial retreat. He had to withstand it. He could not take even a single step backward. Gu was behind him. The scales on his body buzzed, and Tang Wulin gritted his teeth. His right arm was dotted with flickering stars. He summoned his battle armor Vambrace and turned it into a sphere of golden light which protected his chest, increasing his defensive powers. The explosion continued for a few seconds, and by then, most of Tang Wulin's clothes were already torn apart. However, he stood his ground and did not take half a step backward. Roar! An excited dragon's roar was heard from Tang Wulin's body as suddenly took a step forward. The stronger the attack he endured, the more power his supreme golden dragon armor would be able to draw support from. With that one step, another golden soul ring spread out from under his feet, and the remnants of the elemental storm produced by the explosion were dispersed. This time around, the blue-silver-golden light array power increased several times over, and it enveloped the entire stage under the amplification of the supreme golden dragon armor. Yuanen Yehue and Yu Jingyu, who had made that slash earlier, suddenly felt their bodies being emptied. The Saint Sword, the Demon Sword, the Angel, the Fallen Angel behind them, they all instantly disintegrated. The blue-silver-golden light array erupted, and in the next instant, a silver light flashed as another figure appeared before them. The elemental staff struck the ground, and the orb on its tip flashed in 4 colors: green, blue, red, and yellow. Shortly after, an elemental storm exploded. Yu Jingyu and Yuanen Yehue were sent flying at the same time under the terrifying force of the elemental storm. Yuanen Yehue was in a better shape, and she had immediately switched to her Titan Giant Ape Martial Soul. Her body puffed up as she morphed into the Diamond Titan and fended off the elemental storm. Yu Jingyu, on the other hand, did not have this ability. A flash of silver moonlight flashed across, and he was removed from the stage by Elder Cai. Guyu's expression was extremely grim. The elemental staff in her hand was aimed at Yuanen Yehue, who was trying her level best to fend off the elemental storm. Balls of light orbs the size of millstones were shot around like drumfire. Blue fireballs, azure balls of wind, sharp icicles, and meteorites. The four elements took their turns in an elemental explosion, and each of them was only meters away from one another. Within the elemental storm, Yuanen had no way means to dodge the elemental onslaught. In fact, she could not have dodged it even if she wanted to. Guu was controlling the elements that were being shot toward her with spiritual power that was far superior to her peers. Yes, Guu was furious. Usually, she would never use the full extent of her strength for fear of overshadowing Tang Wulin. However, she clearly saw a hint of blood on the edge of Tang Wulin's lips when she was unleashing the elemental storm. He was hurt. This was the first time anyone had ever seen the true terror that is Guu, even the students of first grade class 1. This terrifying offense unleashed by the ball of light was pushing Yuanen backward, and she had amazing defensive capabilities. Her air cannon could not even deflect the elemental onslaught. Blue fireballs seared her exceedingly high temperature, distorting her air cannon so she could not deflect them. The azure balls of wind were like miniature storms that she could not deflect, especially since her air cannon was still torn apart. Sharp icicles revolved around her at high speed, shaving away her air cannon so she still could not deflect them. The meteorites were exceptionally tough. Her air cannon could only slow them down but not destroy them. Yuanen could still break the elemental onslaught being thrown at her with the innate offensive and defensive capabilities of the Diamond Titan. However, the elemental onslaught was forcing her backward. It was a head-on suppression. Tang Wulin held his ground and did not attack. He was shocked as well. How could he not be? He had always known that Guu was strong, and he knew that he was no match for her. However, he only realized the size of the chasm that existed between him and Guu when he witnessed the full extent of her explosive strength. With her control over 7 elements, there were too many battle tactics that she could use. Besides, Tang Wulin felt like it would not have made that much of a difference even if he were to use his blue-silver-golden array on Guu. Boom! Another elemental ball exploded, putting a grim expression on Yuanen's face. Instead of using Devil Titan, she used Titan Strength along with her Diamond Titan to bear the brunt of the attack instead. It was a battle of endurance. In reality, she knew that they had lost this competition. When Tang Wulin took the full force of the attack she made with the Lustergloom Saint Sword head-on, they had already lost. However, Guu's outburst after that was the one that she did not expect, but she would never give up just like that. She would continue the fight. If she could hold on until Guu exhausted her soul power, she would be facing Tang Wulin in a 1-against-1 battle. She might still stand a chance against an injured Tang Wulin. Since she had twin martial souls, her soul power should unsurprisingly be much more formidable compared to Guu no matter how one looked at it. Her soul power rank should be above Guu's as well. The moment one's soul power breached through the barrier of rank 40, its increase would become noticeably lower. She had broken through rank 40 for almost a year now and was only at rank 43. Even then, she was still considered to be among those who were progressing quickly in their cultivation. Guu just had her breakthrough, so she should still be at rank 41. Her elemental staff was her 4th soul skill. That, along with the onslaught of powerful attacks, were probably enough to cause Guu to be expending more energy than Yuanen. 1, 2, 10, 12. Yuanen was already pushed back toward the edge of the competition stage. However, Guu's elemental onslaught was still firing like drumfire and showed no signs of relenting. How could her soul power be this formidable? This is impossible. Yuanen was bug-eyed. Elder Cai was already on the stage with her eyes slightly squinted. She knew what was happening. Guu's soul power should not have been as formidable as Yuanen's, but her martial soul was allowed her to utilize elemental control. The difference between her and a regular soul master was her control over the elements, especially since the elements were unrelated to one's soul power but were instead controlled with spiritual power. Guu's cultivation base was a combination of spiritual and soul power. To top it off, her spiritual power was superior to Yuanen's, so after taking everything into consideration, it was clear why she was able to continue fighting with such strength. Boom! Yuanen's upper body leaned backward. This time, however, she did not retreat. She could not retreat even a single step. If she even took another step backward, she would fall off the stage. Rah! She let out a furious howl. Her fourth soul ring finally shone. She could not win by sheer perseverance, so she could only gamble her win with an all-out final blow. Devil Titan. Her body toughened as she threw a punch that shattered the elemental balls coming her way. She then continued firing her air cannons. At the very least, her increased power would afford her the opportunity to fend off Gu's elemental balls. However, this was also the exact moment when she saw Tang Wulin, smiling all the way as he walked up to Gu's side. That's enough, Tang Wulin patted Gu's shoulder. Gu's elemental staff dimmed and she glanced at him before she did the same to Yuanen Yehue. She said nothing but her attack stopped. Yuanen Yehue was slightly panting. Although her Devil Titan was powerful, it also required a lot of energy. She glanced at Tang Wulin, turned around, and leaped off the competition stage. The outcome of the match was already decided. She could not possibly have a chance if she fought against two opponents. Tang Wulin had given her an opportunity to save face. Cheers could be heard erupting from first-grade Class 1's corner in the spectators' stand. One could argue that their victory over second-grade Class 1 in last year's match was influenced by luck. However, they had won today's battle with their own abilities. Their class had two partnered battles and they won both matches. The second match was especially so since it was a battle between class monitors that saw Yuanen Yehue losing. "Are you alright?" Gu asked Tang Wulin softly. Tang Wulin nodded. "I'm alright. My blood essence was churning earlier, but I'm alright now." As he continued to absorb the Golden Dragon King's essence, his self-healing ability and resistance saw some improvements. When he was hit by the Lustergloom Saint sword earlier, he truly felt as if his insides were on fire. However, the blood essence within his body calmed down in no time, and although he felt a little uncomfortable, he was alright. "What was that flashing skill of yours?" Yu Zhenyu was not depressed even though he lost the competition. Instead, he was filled with curiosity. He went over to Tang Wulin and Gu's corner the moment they stepped down from the competition stage. He tested the power of the Lustergloom Saint sword with Yuanen Yehue earlier, and it was definitely out of the ordinary. Even a five-ringed Soul King could not take this attack of theirs head-on. However, Tang Wulin had took the brunt of the attack single-handedly. This was definitely the doing of his soul skill. Tang Wulin gave him a faint smile. "You really want to know?" Yu Zhenyu nodded forcefully. Tang Wulin said, "I'll tell you if you repeat a grade." Yu Zhenyu was stunned. Repeat a grade? He understood it in the next second. If he repeated the second grade, would he not turn into a first-grade student? "Hey! There's no such as repeating in the academy, all right? We'll be expelled when we don't pass the examination." Tang Wulin did not hear his grumbles. Along with Gu, they were already drowned by the cheers from the first graders. The final challenge list for the match between the first and second grade against third grade Class 1 were out. 3 1-against-1 matches, Yuanen Yehue, Wi Sidwa, and Yi Xinglan. 2 against 2, Tang Wulin and Gu. 7 against 7, Team Leader Tang Wulin, Deputy Team Leader Yuanen Yehue, Members Gu, Xie, Yu Zhenyu, Xu Xiaoyan, and Xu Lishi. The competition was slated for the following Friday. Yuanen Yehue was still largely in shock. Losing to Tang Wulin was only secondary. After all, she had already prepared herself since she had once lost to him. What shocked and puzzled her the most was Xie's power. If one's actual strength was judged, Duan Hunxiao and Yi Xingmo should not have suffered such an utter defeat. However, Xie and Xu Xiaoyan were the ones taking the initiative during the competition. The emphasis was on Xie. He has made too much progress, be it his speed or offense. The current him could no longer be compared to his former self. Even Yuanen Yehue, who stood below the stage, felt the powerful pressure from the searing heat released from his attacks. He had turned so strong already. How did the first graders improve so fast? Faith. If Xie knew about her question, he would have definitely replied her with this word. It was exactly because of Yuan and Yehue that he had been so hard-working. There was only one reason why he worked this hard: he wanted to catch up to her within terms of abilities. He wanted to be good enough for her. "You really all right?" Gu asked Tang Wulin once more when they reached the working students' dormitory. "I'm fine, really. I have coarse skin and thick flesh, didn't you know? By the way, tomorrow's a holiday, you going to the Spirit Pagoda again?" Tang Wulin asked Gu. "Yeah, I don't really have anything to do. So, I'm going to cultivate in the Spirit Pagoda." Gu nodded. Tang Wulin smiled. "You had everyone fooled. I didn't know that you were this powerful already. I'm lucky that I wasn't your opponent. If you keep working this hard, the gap between us will only grow wider." Gu could not help but smile. "What are you worried about?" Tang Wulin smiled. "I'm worried that if we were to become opponents one fateful day, you'd send all my teeth flying." Gu was shocked, and her gaze dimmed in an instant. Although it only lasted for a short time, it did not escape Tang Wulin. "What's the matter?" Gu shook her head. "It's nothing. What do you plan to do on your rest day?" Tang Wulin replied. "I might be going to Heaven's Door City. I've amassed some of the rare alloys I forged and I plan to sell them all there. Also, I want to buy some rare alloys. I hope Uncle Master will teach me something about forging." "I'll go with you," Gu blurted. "Huh? Sure." Tang Wulin looked at her with shock. Since the start of the second term, they've yet to go out together since everybody was busy with their cultivation. Nobody seemed to have the spare time. Gu smiled at him before turning to walk toward her dormitory. This video will end here. Like video and subscribe to my channel.